Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Jared, and today we are going to be doing something a little bit different, and that is talking about a documentary, which I feel like I don't do a whole lot on this channel because I find talking about documentaries, despite loving them to death, they're really hard to actually talk about. You can't really comment a lot on the story, the filmmaking techniques that you can in a narrative feature film, but this is a documentary that after watching, I absolutely fell in love with and I just had to talk about. Now, normally it is October. I would have had a horror movie related review prepared for you guys. However, I recently watched this movie and I just had to talk about it because it's so fascinating of a film and I loved it so much. And it's ultimately a documentary that I've never really even heard of. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, and there's not a lot of people on YouTube that have even really discussed this. And I think it is a really good documentary that needs to be brought up more because of what it represents and how it conveys just a wonderful story overall about time and preservation. And I think ultimately that Dawson City Frozen Time is an absolute masterpiece. It is wonderful work here, and I'm just really excited to talk about this. So really, let's dig into this documentary because not a whole lot of people know about this, and I feel like I just need to kind of set the groundwork here. This is a documentary about preservation. The story of Dawson City Frozen Time starts with the discovery of a bunch of silent film era films that were thought lost to time, that were found in the 1970s in the permafrost in Dawson City in the Yukon of Canada. And the discovery of these films, which there was nearly over 500 films that were rediscovered, brought back all of these lost films from the silent era and brought them back to life, and they were preserved. And so through this documentary, we see that. But then the film also tells us the story of Dawson City itself and how it grew from this small little just pinpoint in the Yukon to a bustling town filled with commerce, movie theaters, and so much more. This movie comments on so many different eras of our history through the gold rush, through the silent era, through everything to do with capitalism, and how this city eventually just kind of dwindled away a little bit. This was a bustling place that eventually saw many different hardships through fires and just many problems along the way. And we see that brought to us through this lost footage, and it is an incredible story to tell. We see from the very beginning how people moved up north and started exploring this area and moving around and settling, creating a town, creating a settlement, and then building houses and gambling joints and saloons, and ultimately a town was formed. And it's just a wonderful story that I think is told so brilliantly, and it paints just a very interesting picture of the time period itself. The movie also spends so much time setting up the preservation of film and how horrible the conditions were for nitrate stock film back in the day. we see how flammable it was and how so much of our early days of cinema are completely lost to time because of how flammable the nitrate film stock was and how precious that footage is. And it also comments on how history as itself is something that can easily be forgotten. It can be remembered, but there are moments in time that will dwindle away, and how the preservation of this film, these 500 plus films, paint a story of a town set in the Yukon and how it transformed throughout the years into what it is today. And it's so wonderful of a story. It's something to aspire to. It's an inspiring tale. And the way it is told is really special too, because we are dealing with a lot of silent film era movies. And so the documentary itself works very much like a silent film. There's pretty much, aside for the beginning of the film and the end of the film that focus mostly on the recovery of these films, is mostly silent. There's no talking heads, really. There's no voiceover. We simply have the images on screen followed by sound effects of like cars or the wind or a train or different things that you might hear in your daily life, especially during the time period. And then this ambient music that you might hear in a silent film that feels dark and mysterious and somber at times, and it's wonderfully done. You're basically watching a silent film, and it's a silent film documentary set in the modern day, and it's wonderfully told. This was so engaging that I never felt this movie's length at all. And it is only 2 hours, but I do find that sometimes your mind can dwindle with a silent film. As a lover of silent film, I can attest to this, that sometimes when you don't have a whole lot of dialogue, these films can feel much longer than they actually are. But this just feels the right length. And I've seen some criticisms by not critics necessarily, but just, regular audience members talking about how this film should have focused mainly on the preservation of these films. But I think they miss the point of what this movie truly is. It's not just about the preservation of these films. It is about how these films preserve a particular important time in history, in the history of Dawson City, and how integral it was. It was really interesting watching this movie and seeing how many famous people were connected to this small little town. From people like Fred Trump to Fatty Arbuckle to so many others. It was such a fascinating watch. I was captivated from beginning to end, and it's a documentary that celebrates filmmaking and celebrates the preservation of film, but also the preservation of history and culture, and how it can so easily evaporate. I think of things such as the Great Library of Alexandria and how that burned down to the ground. Everything that was there completely lost. Histories that we will never know, that we will never see. Things that will be forgotten. And I think that a lot of the history of Dawson City could have been forgotten and hasn't fully been forgotten. Obviously, there's the written record, but these films show us through the lens of film itself what that period was like. And we look at film preservation in a completely different way. It's a fragile, delicate thing because, as this documentary says, nearly 75% or even more of silent films are lost to time. And we're just ever so slowly finding them in the most bizarre of places. But just think about that. There's still so much out there that isn't found, that will be forgotten. And the fact that they were able to find just this many in pretty alright shape, despite some damaging through, obviously, water. There is just an instance in the film where somebody actually was taking their nitrate film stock and just throwing it in the Yukon because talkies were the big norm now and nobody was watching silent films anymore. And it's just really, really sad. It's a compelling story and just ultimately one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. I think that this is something that needs to be on people's radars. People need to give this documentary a chance. It needs to be seen by more people and understood. The only way that I know to watch this is either you can buy it on Amazon and rent it for pretty cheap. It's also available on Tubi, which is how I watch it, or you can buy the Kino Lorber DVD or Blu-ray to finally have access to it. But this is a fantastic documentary. It's utterly perfect in so many ways and tells a compelling story of a past that very much could have been forgotten. And the history of the town itself is just as compelling and even perhaps more compelling than the story of finding these lost relics. But yet it's still so integral to the story as well. Guys, I love this documentary. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. It's completely perfect. One of the best documentaries that I have ever seen, and I implore anybody that watches this review to please seek this out, give it a chance, and just understand the importance of what it is trying to convey to you, what it means for film preservation, and what it means to understand the history of this town. But that is all I got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. This is very much a review that just kind of something that I myself wanted to talk about because nobody really talks about this. And I thought I needed to say something about this because it was something that truly made me fascinated and also really spoke to me. And I think it's worth talking about. But that is all I got for you guys. So as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and stay positive.